Hey guys, what it do? It's your boy Supreme G, the God Man. Today we're looking at Mihawk and the potentiality of him being immortals, the meaning of the eyes, and all of that stuff. So I'm gonna read through this thread first, read it with you guys. I'm gonna skip some of it because some of it isn't that relevant. I'm gonna skip the summary, for example. I'm gonna read the full thing and then we'll have a discussion and talk about it, what we think about it. Now I've always had a theory that because of Mihawk's side that he might be related to Emu, but this theory actually talks about something completely different. It says that they've had the immortality surgery done upon them. So basically, lost fruit was used upon them, and somebody died in order to make them immortal. So let's go through it. It sounds pretty interesting and intriguing. We'll read it and then we'll talk about it. Now, firstly, I want to explain why the ring dice shared between Janisha, that's the elephant, Mihawk, and Emu are specifically something Oda wants to bring attention to and very likely do have a hidden meaning and aren't just a random design quirk shared between a few random characters. In chapter 48, before Mihawk even physically appears in the stories, they bring attention to his hawk eyes that could kill with a glance. Hell, the first time Mihawk is ever mentioned, they refer to him as just Hawkeye. The in-universe explanation for his nickname being Hawkeye is that he has weird eyes, an intense glare, and his name is Mihawk. But that doesn't mean this can't also be used as a double narrative tool. Before you even see the man yourself, Oda wants you to be thinking about how his eyes are in some way something to pay attention to, right? The Mihawk fight then happens in the Baratia arc. You see his eyes and they look a bit weird, and ultimately his character leaves without his eyes really mattering. And it seems like the payoff to the setup of his eyes being focused on was just a way to build intrigue and fear towards the character, and also that his eyes look pretty cool. And in 1,000 chapters since, Mihawk's eyes never come up again. Now, even if two other very important characters weren't later revealed to have the same eyes, that's Emu and Zunisha. My bad for pronunciation, y'all. I want to explain why this isn't reason to discredit Mihawk's eyes as something important. The way reveals work in stories is that we know how saying that shit works. Okay. To get around this problem, you can make the setup subtle. Okay, so I actually should read it. The way reveals work in stories is that we learn new information, payoff, that puts information we already had set up in a different context. To do this, you need the audience to not be thinking about the setup too hard, because a good twist has to have strong setup, and if you think about the setup too hard, you can reverse engineer it and figure out where the story is likely going and what is the reveal, ruining the potential shock of the reveal. To get around this problem, you can make the setup subtle so that people don't think about it too hard and what it may lean into, but not too subtle that when the reveal happens, people have forgotten the setup and don't connect the dots. Think of Sanji saying he's from the North Bloom Jaya. A twist used information we had already learned, put in a new context. You can also write so much information into your story that the audience loses track of it all. And so when a seemingly new idea is introduced, you think back and correlate it to the setup you had almost forgotten about. Think Jinbei being mentioned in Arlong Park, not even a twist, just the new character of Jinbei appearing in Impel Down when really he had already been mentioned 400 chapters before. Now, these are two techniques Oda uses constantly, and both of them could be used to great effect with Mihawk. Bringing it back to Mihawk, the setup is his eyes being brought attention to when we first hear of him. This seemingly ends up going nowhere, so we assume that it meant nothing. However, we also don't get a concrete answer to why Oda brought attention to Mihawk's eyes, and so we just assume by the end that it was just set up Mihawk as a scary dude, and we move on. So essentially, we all took notice of it. Enough to where it was brought back into the story now. Most people look at least associate Mihawk with his strange eyes, right? But not enough to where anybody is thinking about it now, making it ripe for a great reveal much later down the line, where it turns out there was a real answer to that question, and we are rewarded for puzzling over what it could mean in chapter 48. The reason I'm talking about this storytelling stuff first, instead of the other pieces of in-world evidence that I'll explain in a minute, is because ultimately, people like or dislike a theory based on the emotional reaction it gives them, if it feels right, over how much it logically fits using evidence from the story. What I'm trying to do here is explain why this would work and make sense as a story, or in the story, right? how there could potentially be more narrative juice squeezed from this detail than we originally thought. Because if I only explained lore details, then a lot less people would believe me and would be dismissive because they come from a place of ultimately not feeling deep down like it works in a story sense, or that it's too much of a stretch, and then trying to find evidence against the theory from that point. There's also the fact that both Zunisha and Imu's eyes are treated as reveals when they're shown. In both cases, it shies away from showing the eyes for as long as possible before specifically zooming in on them, just before the character stops being the focus of the story. That simply the eyes being shown to be ringed is treated as a reveal implies the eyes of significance. Now I'm just going to double check that Junisha is the goddamn elephant, right? Because listen, I have a disability. It's called can't remember faces. You know what I'm saying? Okay, I was right. I can't remember faces, names, and places. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah, okay. I didn't want to look like an idiot and get crucified in the comment section if I didn't know that, you know, who Zanissa was. Let me look at Zanissa's eyes actually, because I can't really remember the eyes. Like it just looks like a black hole. You know what I'm saying? Eyes. Let me see. Oh, it is like Mihawk's and oh my god. Yo, that might be. Yo, this theory might be cool. Okay. Okay, Imu's eyes are treated as, okay, there's also the fact that both Janissa and Imu's eyes are treated as reveals when they're shown. In both cases, it shies away from showing the eyes for as long as possible before specifically zooming in on them. And they're the only three characters with those eyes, by the way, just before the character stops being the focus of the story. And there's no reason for because Zenitsu and Imu are ancient beings, so you can argue that, you know, they have that for being ancient being. A part of the trait is you get those eyes. But Mihawk is not an ancient being, so how does Mihawk have it? And this is why I have a theory of Mihawk actually being Imu's son, or child, or something like that, and that's why and how he has what he has and he does what he does. You know what I'm saying? Even though he had forsake his name and it only goes by Mihawk. Or Dracula, Mihawk, whatever. That's simply the eyes being shown to be ringed, treated as a reveal implies the eyes of a significance. Okay. Imu's eyes reveal. If one of these didn't exist, then I wouldn't think anything of it, but it's the fact that they're both structured so similarly, which implies that they're both reveals. Okay, the arguments against. Before I go any further, I want to address the largest points against the idea that the ringed eyes are important. I can think of. There's still nothing to suggest these eyes aren't just a design quirk. All you've done so far is explain why Mihawk's eyes having a secret explanation isn't impossible and could be milk for story juice, but really it's still very unlikely. Is Mihawk's eyes being weird in Baratia really a question that needs to be answered? It pretty obviously is just there to make Mihawk look scary. I think most people should be aware that definitely there's some significance to it more beyond that, right? I think surely that's something that everybody agrees upon, right? I hope so anyway. The only time that the story brings attention to these eyes was in Baratia, so Oda probably hadn't thought of any this shit by then, and setting up Mihawk up scary really was just explanation to tie up that loose end. Yeah, but you know, we know that Oda does that. He does a bunch of setups, goes back, and then tries to figure out its reveal. I think he had a setup for it. Maybe he didn't have the reveal yet, but maybe he did. And I think, you know, he can build the reveal later. He knows he has a setup, so he can just go back and be like, what do I want these eyes to signify, right? So by the time he introduced Zenusia, then he's like, okay, he probably had a better idea of what that reveal would be. And then when he introduced Imu, he was like, okay, it's almost time to have the reveal. So I think, you know, when they fight Mihawk, I think we're going to get a reveal. Okay, the only time that the story brings attention to those eyes was in Baratia, so that's probably okay. For the first and second point, I hope I've done a good enough job by now explaining that expressively bringing your attention to something and ultimately not answering it concretely, no matter anything else, always leaves room to expand. Almost everything in a story, no matter how small, generally has a purpose. Even if it's just the Straw Hats having goofy interactions together on the Sunny, it builds character, but also progresses into the next line for someone else to say, which itself often eventually leads to the introduction of a new theme or piece of conflict in the story or arc. So when they're like, look, the eyes, guys, I've never seen eyes like them, terrifying, hawk-like eyes they wore, and then the only real payoff is you, the audience, seeing the eyes and nothing they look not noticing they look unique and leaving you to make your own assumptions, then that's a bit odd. But when you're talking about One Piece, where Oda frequently pays off tiny clues from sometimes over 2 decades ago to answer major questions, and then he introduces two very mysterious but very important characters as having the same eyes as Mihawk, We scrutinize any piece of information we have about these two characters in the hopes of finding major answers. And yet, here we have someone screaming about Mihawk's eyes in a way that couldn't be more obvious. To me, it signifies that this is worth paying more attention to. For the third point, I think this is a terrible attitude. For example, when Oda wrote chapter 1, he definitely didn't intend the Gum Gum fruit to be the human fruit, model sun god Nika, but that's what ended up happening. And now we can look back on chapter 1 in a different light, knowing that information, even though that wasn't the information in Oda's head at the time of writing this chapter, and that reveal ended up arguably enhancing the story in many ways. Same could easily apply here. The actual theory. If nothing else, then I really want to drill into your mind the point that there is a significance to the eyes. Not only because the idea that there isn't one is the biggest counter to my theory, but also because if we know there is a significance to the eyes, then we can work from there to guess what it is. And because we've had over 1,000 chapters and the story seems to be wrapping up soon, we most likely already have the pieces to find what the true meaning is. Now that I've established that base, I can explain what my theory is. So what links these three characters? I had the idea that they could all have had the immortality surgery for all the reasons explained in my first paragraph. So Nietzsche's rotten look, Imu covering herself up, and Mihawk aging at a normal rate, despite two of them being around since the Void Century, basically confirmed for Imu, and while it wasn't contradicted by anything, I wanted something else to make it stronger. So I started thinking about immortality in the series, and I remember the theory I saw on some YouTube comment or Reddit thread that I unfortunately can't find now that said that the secret of the celestial dragons was immortality, that the sun tree Eve produces as air that the celestial dragons breathe in. Okay, the sun tree Eve. Is that the tree that Imu is in the room with? Or is that big ass tree? I don't know. The flamingo referencing the Celestial Dragon Secret, chapter 906. In the Bible, there was the tree of knowledge and the tree of life. The original humans, Adam and Eve, ate the fruit and from the tree of knowledge, and so were cast down from paradise for committing the original sin. We know there was a treasure tree Adam that Frankie used the wood of to build the Sunny, which only strengthens this parallel. The home of the celestial dragons is Marlejois. Bro, I can't pronounce it, and is likened to paradise. It's where the gods live and is literally on the top of the world and is built around the sun tree Eve. Now, the story never confirms where the top of the sun tree Eve is. However, as we know that Fishman, we know that Fishman Island, where its roots are, is literally directly under Marie-Joie. Yeah, that place. The top has to go through there. Maybe Oda hid his information during the Fishman Island arc because to get us to think about the correlation between the celestial dragons and the sun tree, the tree of life. Excuse me. The reason they are always seen wearing bubbles outside of Marie-Joie is just because they don't want to breathe the air of the commoners, but because they literally need it to contain the air of the sun tree Eve to remain immortal. This is probably why Marie-Joie was built around Eve. Okay, Mjosgard thinks he's going to die and specifically requests a mask after his bubble is broken. Chapter 635. In Fishman Island flashback, the celestial dragon Donquat Mjosgard breaks his bubble after his ship was attacked by sea kings. He thinks he's going to die, not because of any injuries, but because he broke his bubble. And that's what he was asking for, saying, "Bring me a mask and save my life." Mjosgard is clearly a teenager in this flashback, as he looks like one and he asks his dad for everything. However, when we see him in the Reverie 10 years after this point, he has clearly aged up. If this theory is true, then it makes sense that Oda would want to highlight the difference in appearance after only 10 years by making him a child teenager before and an adult after, rather than an adult at both points, which would be harder to show. Mjosgard as a teenager, Mjosgard 10 years ago, okay. Unlike the five elders, okay. Mjosgard also says that the speech of Queen Otahame gave him his humanity. This is obviously meant to mainly be interpreted as he was grounded to reality and made aware of the folly of the celestial dragons after that speech. But the reference to gaining his humanity at all is interesting and makes sense as a double meaning if this theory is true. As Oitaheme's speech was the same moment he broke his bubble and literally gained his humanity. Mjosgard was most likely being poetic here for the sake of concealing a double meaning from the audience, as well as preserving the celestial dragon secret in universe. Mjosgard looks mortified when his bubble breaks because he's no longer immortal. This implies that if you ever once stop breathing in the air, you can't get it back. All while the five elders, high-ranking celestial dragons who are always in Marie-Joie, never seem to age. I suppose this part doesn't really make sense because the five elders don't wear it when they come down to earth. They have no problem breathing in that air. So I think this point might be kaput. The whole tree thing, I think, might just be kaput. I'm not really interested in the whole tree thing, to be honest. I just care about the other stuff, bro. Let me skip ahead. This makes sense if you consider both. I don't care. Okay, the problems. There are a few problems, however. When it came up with this theory, I was bashing a lot of it off the common conception that the five elders haven't aged since O'Hara 20 years ago, and so basing, I wouldn't say bashing, since O'Hara 20 years ago, and so are likely mortal. But I reread the O'Hara flashbacks while researching this, and we only see the silhouettes. There's actually nothing to suggest the five elders are mortal. We only see them full in the modern era, so there are actually no instances shown of celestial dragons being ageless. This doesn't contradict my theory, it just means it's way less supported. There's also the fact that I found out while writing this that the immortality surgery is more accurately translated as the ageless surgery, which is honestly such a blatant contradiction to my theory that I kind of think it supports it more, being an ironic title or a lie put out by the world government. After all, Oda could have left it as the immortality surgery and have it still make you ageless, but the fact that he narrowed it down to specifically bring up not aging is, I don't know. Okay. There's also the fact that Cavendish, when he's sharing his face with his demon Hakuba, has the ringed eyes. I originally wrote this off as a design detail similar to how other characters such as Big Mom on a Rampage and Kaido in chapter 1042 have similar looking eyes. However, none of them really look like the ringed eyes. Cavendish Hakuba really does have the ringed eyes though. Let me see what he's talking about. Who the hell is Cavendish? Yeah, he has Mihawk's eyes and he has Zenushi's. Okay, that is. When the hell did this guy was in the story, bro? I can't remember this at all, bro. But I read the manga, so I can't be remembering half of this. This leads me to another theory, which, bro, your theory ain't finished, bro. Like what? This led me to another theory, which again isn't mine, but the ringed eyes are to do with the cursed blades, which Mihawk has, and which Zoro now has, and that, conferred to have, and that the cursed what? Wait, what the fuck? No, okay. Okay, he travels without a crew and his journey is very solid. Okay, let me go back here. If you consider both the secret of mortality surgery are both different types of mortality that are both flawed. Okay, if you consider the celestial dragon secret, okay, that are both flawed and that both types make up for the other's flaw, hence you needing both in order to achieve true power, true mortality. The air from the Eve makes you truly immortal and ageless, but is an external source that you have to maintain at all times, lest you lose it forever. Meanwhile, the mortality surgery makes yourself truly immortal, but you still age and eventually decay. If you had both, you would be ageless and unable to lose it, truly immortality. Well, that can't be true because, like, people have babies up there and those babies grow up, so it doesn't make sense that the tree breeding makes you ageless there. So I think he had an initial good idea, but this whole tree shit that he brought in just, I think, takes it away. This could also do a lot for Miho's characterization. We know he's eventually going to fight Zoro for the title of the greatest swordman, and this event will probably be the most screen time he gets, as well as his last big screen, meaning that it is when we're likely going to get a backstory, if we ever do. And the idea that Mihawk is immortal and knows it explains every facet of his character. He travels without a crew and is generally a very solitary figure, setting himself up in the ruined Mogi kingdom. This is because he's jaded from the knowledge that making lasting human relationships is pointless, as he will outlive everyone and will eventually have to watch them die. Also, if you remember, Zoro was sent to Mihawk by Kuma, which means Kuma knew Mihawk wouldn't kill Zoro. Which means there's actually another thing here that we didn't really think about. Guys, I think I might do a video on that. Why did Kuma send Zoro to Mihawk? You know what I'm saying? He sent everybody to the right place. But in an interesting way. I don't know. I think he sent Luffy to, Amazon Lily or whatever because he wanted to test, first he tested the crew, then he wanted to test them to test Luffy to really see if he's the sun god Nika. And I think that's why he sent him there. But anyways, okay. He travels, so might as well just dedicate himself every day to being. It explains why he's the strongest, pointless, as he will outlive everyone and would eventually have to watch them die. It explains why he's the strongest swordsman, because he knows he has no time limit, and so might as well just dedicate himself every day to being the strongest swordsman before his body decays. It explains the Dracul surname. Nothing else about him seems to resemble Dracula or vampires other than, I guess, his association with the Mogi Kingdom, unless you consider the angle of him losing his humanity and becoming immortal, and explains him taking up residence existence in the Mogi Kingdom, a desolate ruin of a place where all else is dead except him, living on in solitude. All well, does I mean the monkeys and shit, right? But this is or the gorillas. But this is where Mihawk's character arc comes in. Despite knowing he's immortal and that human connection will ultimately bring him grief, in the 2-year timescape, he seemingly forms quite a companionship with Perona, letting her come with him to escape from the Navy. And he trains Zoro for 2 years despite not wanting to at first. And with the Navy closing in, where else will he go than to Shanks, his former rival who he pushed away? He's not going to Shanks. He's 2 years old, to be fair. It's a decent theory, but I think he makes his own theory weaker by bringing up all that tree stuff, man. I don't think all that tree stuff, I think, is way off mark. I think he may be immortal. The eyes could signify immortality, but I don't think it's the surgery. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, because it's Mihawk seemed to have always had the eyes. Young Mihawk had the eyes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think he got that trait from Emu somehow. I think that's probably the more relevant theory. That's what I think. And I don't think he has much to do with immortality. But it's a good idea. What do you guys think? Like, comment down below your thoughts. Do you think this guy is cooking? I really, like, you know, this is 2 years old, so we gotta, you know, we obviously have the hindsight is 2020. But I think the tree one would have never, like, I just would have never thought. That didn't really add up to me at all. Or even the celestial dragons being immortal. I don't think that's a thing either. Because otherwise it wouldn't be different generations coming out of the celestial dragon from marriage as well, whatever. So I just don't think that's true at all. I think only the elders and Emu are immortal, and maybe Mihawk. You know what I'm saying? So that's my thoughts anyway. What do you guys think? It's been your boy Supreme Uchiha, the god, because even Gartland is like pretty old now. Do you know what I mean? Like, all of these guys are aging, and you, it just doesn't, to me, it just doesn't add up. But I like the concept of it. You know what I'm saying? I think the concept of it is good. I think the execution and the explanation is poor. I might do a video explaining it myself, but we'll think about it. Anyway, hope you liked the video. Subscribe, leave a comment, dislike, whatever you feel. I'm out. Subscribe.